Up is the adoption of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Colclough, second by Councillor Haim. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Declaration of conflict for items on the agenda. Seeing none. Public input period, up to 2 minutes regarding items listed on the agenda. Name and address for the record, please. Seeing no movement. Next item, approval of minutes, June the 26th, 2017. Moved by Councillor Colclough, second by Councillor Neary. Discussion on the minutes. Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Any business arising from the minutes? Okay, next item, bylaw number 60.35. This is the item that previously went to public hearing. Staff's put together after some meetings, put together some motions that they recommend with regards to amending the proposed rezoning. Councillor Hain?
Yeah. So I move staff's recommendation that council withdraw the motion on the floor, that council gives third reading to the District of Blanchville zoning bylaw number 60, 2005 amendment, 7143 Colette Road, bylaw 60.35, 2017.
Second by Councillor Gizelbrecht. Any discussion on the withdrawal? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next item, Councillor Hain.
The council rescind second reading to the District of Blanchville zoning bylaw number 60, 2005 amendment, 7143 Colette Road, bylaw 60.35, 2017, given on May 8, 2017.
Seconded by Councillor Colclough. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Councillor Hain, do you wish to continue?
No, someone else can.
Okay. She's done too. She's in the minutes. Let's move on. Councillor Neary.
Okay, thank you, Worship. I move that Council gives second reading to District of Blanchville zoning bylaw number 60, 2005 amendment, 7143 Calais Road, bylaw number 60.35, 2017 as amended.
Second by Councillor Colclough. Discussion on second reading. Councillor Folsey.
Can I ask a question about the zoning bylaw itself at this time?
Yes, you can.
Okay. So on page 15, special regulation A, the 40%, what's that based on? Through your staff?
So, based on the last meeting where this bylaw was discussed by council, there was a concern raised about the property being solely developed for residential. So that provision was put in there to address that issue. Effectively, what it says is that at least 40% of the development shall be commercial. So you could have, if the development were to go through, 40% commercial, 60% residential. It ensures a mixed use on site.
Yeah, follow. So I'm not sure if it's... No. Is that based on site area or square footage of the total building or buildings?
Sorry, it's based on the square footage of the buildings.
Okay. Is that a worthy addition or amendment to the bylaw?
I guess I'll find out when we vote.
Thank you. No, just clarifying what the percentage is actually referencing.
Oh.
Is what I'm intending there.
Okay. So did you say square footage?
That's right, square footage.
Okay. Footprint or floors?
Square footage of the combined buildings on site.
2 floors.
That's right, 2 floors.
Counts as twice.
That's
But
correct.
it's 1,000 square foot footprint. 2
It's the
stories.
total square footage, so that includes all
Okay.
floors.
Further discussion. Councillor Hain.
I still have some concerns with this bylaw. I'm going to wait to hear from the residents to see what their input is. But again, being a hardcore supporter of business in the community, I see this as a erosion of the business community. you know, we're going to start allowing 40% of the commercial area to be or 40% to be commercial and 60 to be residential. That's a significant shift. We heard earlier in the year how important commercial and industrial property is to this community to support our tax base, and yet here we're looking to erode it. We talked about doing an economic strategy to find ways to make the core more vibrant, and again, this is looking to erode it. I'm not sure if this addresses the issue, but I do have concerns with going down to 40%. You know, I love Lanceville, and I'd like to see it become a vibrant, boisterous community, and I don't really see that happening if we erode the business community.
Councillor Neary, then Councillor Swain.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question of clarification through to staff, building on Councillor Hames' comments. My understanding is that it has to be, the bylaw is specifying a minimum of 40% that does not preclude 100% of the site being used for commercial. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
No. Councillor Swain.
Through the chair, you know, I echo a lot of actually Councillor Hames' concerns about this property in terms of the shift to 40% being commercial. You know, it is concerning, but I would like to make an amendment to this zoning reapplication. So with the special regulations A, that it has the language in there with respect to the square footage of actual floor space. Because 40%, if we just leave it, is 40% of what I picked that up right away, and it's again, it's one of those concerns down the road. Should we have further interpretation about this or discussions about the intent of this? I think we're scratching our heads or replaying video, but even then, I think it's a lot simpler just to put the language in there. So again, I'd like to make that amendment that we include 40% of square footage of floor space, or I don't know what the correct language for this should be.
Mr. Limshu, would the correct language be floor area?
It'd be 40% of the total floor area.
Yes. Okay, so
Just for clarity for the minute taker, it's a motion to amend the motion on the floor to add the words as further amended by striking. I'd like to know what we're striking, and then inserting 40% of floor area.
I believe it would be the addition of 40% of the total floor area to special regulation A. So nothing striked, it would just be an addition to clarify what the measure is. Seconded by Councillor Colclough. Okay, discussion on the amendment. Now keep in mind the amendment itself is just adding the words about floor area, not debating that percentage. Councillor Hain? Yes.
I'll wait for you that.
Okay. Any discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, all is in favor? Opposed? Motion carried, which gets us back to the original amendment as amended. Anything further, Councillor Swain?
Not at this point.
Okay. Councillor Hain?
Again, I would like to see a larger percentage for the business community. When this application came forward, we heard it was about the fact that Cruise Plus didn't have enough space for their staff. And to me, it feels like this bylaw has now morphed into being about residential. So I think we need to put it back to what the original intent was, which was about commercial and providing space for commercial operations and a business to survive in Lanceville and have the employees that it needs. So I'd like to make an amendment that we change the percentage to 60% for commercial based on floor area.
Do we have a seconder for that amendment? Seconded by Councillor Colson.
Could I get some clarity on what the motion is? It's a motion to amend by striking 40% of total floor area?
To 60% of total floor area.
So there's no adding the word commercial?
Well, for commercial use.
No, commercial's already in that line.
Okay, but it wasn't in the motion that's on the floor. Okay.
Okay, so any discussion on the amendment? Councillor Gazaret.
Yes, through to staff, why was the 40% number originally put in there? Did it relate to other regulations, other communities? What was the rationale?
The 40% came about through discussion with the applicant. Basically, we're just trying to provide them with flexibility in terms of the zoning. The intent under the land use designation within the official community plan allows for a mixed-use development. And so the thought was, if we set the minimum to 40, it certainly ensures that there is a mixed-use development on the site. The point raised earlier by council with respect to the intent of the redevelopment of the site has not changed. It is the intent of the landowner to expand or redevelop the site to accommodate additional staff for their growing business. But they also like the residential component as well, because the residential component will actually assist with the financing of the project overall.
Councillor Colqua.
Yeah, speaking against the amendment, although I agree that the commercial component is vital for the future of the village, I think what is equally as vital is people. And in most municipalities, in most communities that you see, there's always a chicken and an egg. Do you get the commercial business there, or do you get the people there? And it's always been a struggle. City of Nanaimo is a good example. It wasn't until they finally started to get a critical mass of people in the downtown core that the commercial businesses took off. So I understand the rationale. I'm certainly comfortable with 40% minimum. I also agree with staff's comment there on the viability. Having been involved in mixed-use developments like this, it can be a pretty fine line, and the residential may be the thing that allows the development of the commercial space go ahead.
Further discussion on the amendment. Councillor Coulson.
So it seems odd to me, though, that we'd have a commercial zoning bylaw that allows more residential than commercial. Why don't we have a residential zoning bylaw that allows more commercial than residential? Right? It's just, to me, it's inconsistent. If we're trying to drive commercial use down here, let's force it so that there's more commercial use required. This gets particularly interesting when you consider the zone that's now been established as part of the OCP process, where the 3 or 4 properties to the right of Colette and Lanceville Road are now part of the village core. Who knows what zoning that will go under? Again, I go back to clarity. If we want it commercially zoned down here to try and drive commercial industry, let's make the zoning bylaw reflect that.
Further discussion. Councillor Hain.
Yeah, this is my final comment. This sets a precedent. As soon as you allow one commercial property to go to 40% commercial and put residential in, and intentions don't mean anything to me. It's what the bylaw says, because that's what a property owner can act on. Until we see what's actually done, we don't know what's really going to occur on that property. So, visualize right now, basically all becoming, or 60% of that becoming an apartment building. Visualize everything across that road, most of it becoming apartment buildings or residential. Well, that leaves almost nothing for a core. And to try and bring business into a village that's got no commercial left in it pretty much, good luck with that. And it's the commercial redevelopment that's going to pay for these sidewalks or put wires under the ground. It's not going to be residential because they're taxed at the lowest tax rate. And the property will get split between commercial rate and residential rate. It doesn't get taxed at the higher rate. So there's a significant erosion of our property taxes right there. Who picks up that tax? Well, that now goes onto the backs of the residents, because we've just eroded all of the commercial down here. So, this to me sets a horrible precedent on where we're going. And if we want to get rid of the core, then fine, let's just say that. But to move it down to 40%, I just think that sets a horrible precedent.
Okay, further discussion. One of the things we got to be careful of, we're discussing between 40 and 60%. We're not discussing commercial, no commercial, residential, no residential. We have to be careful how restricted we want to get in our discussions revolving around things like zoning, because various property developers in this respect, or building developers in this case, some level of flexibility for creativity in that needs to be in there. I disagree that it jeopardizes the commercial core aspect, whether it's 40 or 50% or whatever. We're really talking about one unit here, one unit there type of an aspect. One question I do have from staff, though, is parking requirements. If we start moving these percentages, there's commercial parking requirements and there's residential parking requirements, and they're different. And when it comes to the aspect of adding number of units, which would change depending upon the percentages or taking away units, what's the effect on the parking requirements?
You're quite correct. The parking requirements do differ depending on the use, and even within the commercial uses themselves, office versus retail, for example. Certainly what happens is you'll get your development, and your development will have an initial mix of commercial and residential. And certainly in a perfect world, that mix won't change. The tenants may change, but the actual commercial uses may stay the same. However, there are times when commercial tenants do change and the type of commercial uses will change. And at that point in time, when the person comes in for that change, we certainly review the bylaw to ensure that there's compliance to the parking code. Now, if they're unable to meet those requirements at that point in time, they do have the ability to make application for a variance some future date.
But how do we monitor, for example, whether something is, and honest, I don't know the exact parking requirements,
Right.
whether something is personal service use or office? Councillor Colclough, could you help me out?
Good argument for business licenses.
Other than regulatory.
I mean, really and truly, what would happen is, should the zoning be approved, the development permit would be required at the prior to the building permit being issued. And through the development permit stage, we'd certainly have discussions with the applicant to ensure that there's adequate parking for the intended use at that point in time. Certainly, we've made it very clear to the applicant that should there be any future changes, then they were subject to the regulations of the day.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment on the percentage? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Colclough, Mayor Haim, Councillor Neary, and Councillor Gilbert opposed. Motion defeated. Which gets us back to the original second reading with that one amendment. Any further discussion? Councillor Swain.
Yeah, through the chair to staff, just a quick question. Is there any way of including any language in this zoning bylaw regarding that the actual commercial building has to be built first before any residential is put in? Because there's really nothing in here that actually indicates that the commercial has to come first or should come first. Because we're trying to basically keep commercial property going in Lanceville.
You guys pick.
I just want to be clear that the motion that's on the floor right now is to amend further in Schedule Number 1 under special regulations by striking 40% should be used for commercial uses and inserting 40% of total floor area should be used for commercial uses.
Sure, okay. I thought we
Yeah.
dispensed with that, but
No,
apparently not.
you only dispensed with the 60% down to 40.
Okay,
So
thank
you're
you.
still on the amendment to add in the words of total floor area.
Okay.
Okay. So you may want to dispense with
Let's
that.
dispense with
that,
that
yeah.
one then.
Okay.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Trudy. Okay, Councillor Swain, your question and...
No, so to address that issue, I would suggest rather than putting it in the bylaw, I would suggest that we talk to the applicant about having a covenant registered on title to ensure that the first building is commercial.
just
And we would have that covenant registered prior to adoption, or it'd be a condition of adoption of approval of the bylaw, should we get to that point.
Haven't we already inherently have it in special regulation A? Because if
That's
the
right.
percentage has to be commercial,
You're correct.
commercial has to be built first.
That's right.
Or some
They
combination.
would be built concurrently. I mean, the reality is that both the commercial and the residential uses would be constructed concurrently.
And they may add to it later to adjust, but. Does that address that, Councillor? Okay. Any additional discussion? Last question I have, orientation of the buildings on the property, recognizing we've got mixed use. Let's just hypothetically say somebody wanted to put the commercial on the back of the property and the residential on Lanceville Road, which I think would again erode that aspect. How do we deal with that?
Right, again, through the development permit process, we would be looking at orientation of the building. Certainly you want to encourage commercial closer to the main road, Lanceville Road. In this case, I would anticipate, again, it be a combined mixed-use building. So you have, generally commercial on the ground floor, residential above. So if council recalls, in the information package, there's a couple of conceptual plans that show potential orientations for future buildings on the site. But certainly we'd encourage the buildings closer to Lanceville Road.
I guess my worry is the word encourage. Require seems stronger than me.
Okay, required.
Can we require?
Through the development permit process, that's the point in which we talk about those sorts of details. And certainly we can require.
Thank you. That's what I'm looking for. Councillor Coulson.
So where do we capture that requirement on paper, rather than this discussion?
Typically, it would be through the development permit guidelines, which is outlined within the official community plan.
So within the official community plan review and revision, the committee could suggest that be put in there?
Certainly, it's a consideration when the application comes forward to council. I don't recall off the top of my head if that provision is specifically indicated in the current CP, but certainly in the new official community plan, these are things that we'll be looking for to tighten up.
Okay. Councillor Geselbrecht and Councillor Kolpa?
Is there any appetite to require a feng shui adjudication of the positioning of the property? Would the planner be opposed to that if somebody came forward?
Do you wish to answer that or just leave it alone? Probably not. Councillor Kolpa?
So you answer my questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Oh, Councillor Coulson.
So in light of the comment we just heard, I'm going to follow up with that then. So the development permit guidelines, which are part of the OCP, did I hear correctly that will those be approved as just another piece of the broader OCP, or will we have the opportunity to discuss that specific set of guidelines as part of the OCP process of us approving items produced from that process? Did that make sense?
Not completely.
So the development permit guidelines are part of the OCP, if I heard correctly. Will we just be getting one thing to approve as part of our current OCP process? Or will the development permit guidelines be a kind of a separate piece that we'll get to discuss, review, and approve separately from the broader OCP document?
Mr. Lynch?
Just for clarification, are we talking about this application, or are we talking about development permit guidelines in general?
I'm just talking broader.
In general, yes.
Yes. So through the official community plan review process, we're in the process now of preparing general policy directions, and ultimately that will come to council for a review. The idea is to prepare a draft document with specific details for council's review, and the hope is that that would be ready by early fall. Within the document, we will be addressing specific policies and guidelines related to the development permit and general land uses throughout the community.
Thank you, because my concern is, you know, we've gotten into some details of elements tonight of our commercial core development guidelines and so forth. This pales into comparison to the volume of content in the OCP document. So I don't want to see stuff just kind of get lost in the shuffle because we basically are getting one thing to approve, and that would be the whole OCP with all these kind of subsets of criteria and requirements and so on.
But technically, the OCP bylaw is one bylaw, so there is one final vote, let's call it. How council chooses to go through it, similar to the idea of our budgets, for example, where we go through certain specific pieces of it and make motions to amend those pieces, but there's still a final overall vote on the budget.
Okay.
Okay, anything further? Councillor Coppola, yes.
Yeah, through you to staff for clarification. At the point where we're considering a development permit for an applicant, is council restricted to requiring things that are covered under guidelines in the OCP? Or can they consider other things? For example, if the public comes forward with a certain concern and there's a way to address that, can we require things that aren't covered and specifically laid out in the OCP as a guideline?
Generally, the intent is to follow the policies outlined within the development permit guidelines. There might be special circumstances whereby things do come up, and certainly we'll have those discussions with the applicant. But really and truly, it's following the policies and provisions within the development permit guidelines when you're reviewing the application. So just to be clear, in this case, what we'd be looking for is forming character. That would be the topic of discussion when we're looking at the guidelines related to the future development of the site. So forming the character covers the detailed design of the building. They'll cover landscaping. We'll look at parking layouts, screening of recycling, garbage facilities, those sorts of things.
Yeah, so in other words, that's over and above what's in the actual OCP. Those are development permit guidelines?
That's right.
Yeah.
But the development permit guidelines are listed in the OCP.
That's correct.
So it is part of that document. It's not a separate document.
It's not a separate document.
Okay, any further discussion? I'm just checking with Trudy. Are we on the main motion or
We are on the main motion.
just
as
double
amended.
checking?
Council gives second reading to the District Landscape Zoning Bylaw 60, 2005. Bylaw number 60.35, 2017, as amended and as further amended on Schedule Number 1 under Special Regulations, Item A, by striking not less than 40%, bracket 40%, shall be used for commercial uses, and inserting not less than 40% of total floor area shall be used for commercial uses.
Everybody ready? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Opposed by Councillor Haim, motion carried. There's a further recommendation about going to a public hearing on July the 24th. Councillor Neer?
So moved, Your Worship, unless you want me to read it all right completely.
There's just staff's recommendation there.
Absolutely.
Okay, including the date of July 24th at 7 p.m.
It works for me, I don't know if anybody else.
Is that a seconder, Councillor Swain? Or?
Yes.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Swain. Discussion. Hearing none, all is in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay.
Were there any opposed? Sorry.
No, not on that one. Okay, on to reports. 12A, Mayor and Council reports. I'll start off on the left there. Councillor Gilbert.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I want to state that I was attended at the ribbon cutting and opening ceremony for the Lanceville Historical Society that was held this Saturday at, I think it was 10:30. I think the public should be thanking not only Brian Blood and Lynn Reeve for an excellent exhibit that is now in this building of Lanceville artifacts, National Film Board video, and I hope that this can be showcased during Minetown Days. I don't know what the plans are. It's a spectacular little exhibit. It's preserving our heritage. I also want to thank Councillor Colclough, as well as former Councillor Graham Savage, for the excellent work they did in putting an addition on the main floor at the back of the Costin Hall to an existing area. Beautiful job. Lots of people attended. Good work, and as well, I'd like to thank the Seaside Society for permitting all of this to go through. It's a real plus for our community to have this, and hopefully we'll carry through with this and see even more.
Councillor Coulson.
Nothing.
Councillor Neary. Councillor Colclough. Councillor Hain.
Thank you. I have a couple of items. First off, on the agenda of June the 26th, there was a discussion of Upper versus Lower Landsville for entitlement of the City of Nanaimo water. I mentioned that the City of Nanaimo water would be going to the Ryland property development in Lower Landsville, and Councillor Gesselberg and Colclough suggested that I was making it up. This was based on documents that had been provided by staff previously, and also on the next day, staff sent out the OCP public notification boards and maps clearly showing that the City of Nanaimo water would be provided to the Ryland development. I feel I'm owed an apology from those council members who knew my statements were correct, and I am disappointed that staff did not comment at the last meeting to confirm what I was saying is true. So that was very frustrating for me. Secondly, I would like to thank those new residents who have come forward after the story in the Nanaimo News Bulletin. Sorry, I take a minute.
Breathe.
About the issues of transparency regarding the OCP. I want to read a small letter from one resident that I received in response to that letter. I get mad when my integrity is challenged. I am one of the some verbatim responders as mentioned by staff, as also in my neighbor who with over 300 hours of door knocking in the Phantom and Alt Road area. There's people that need water from a reliable source. I've talked to them. So why Councillor Will Gesselberg said he had not heard from residents about the review process, I have no idea. Perhaps he should have knocked on a few doors and listened to the few of the older and forgotten and ignored people to get a better picture. For 40 years, people have struggled with an inadequate water supply, and we use grey water through the summer and also in winter sometimes. I buy bottled water as I have a very ill wife, and for medical reasons, it's this much more suitable. I am not in the process of refurbishing my well and water equipment. This will cost at least $10,000, but it could be it could be a waste of good money if Foothill sucks the water from our wells. There has not been a visible investigation of area residents' water needs. I had a visit from staff early this spring in response to one meeting and a further letter from him. And basically he's saying he feels like he's been forgotten in this process. So the comments I raised with regards to the OCP process, I believe, are very justified. So I thank those residents that trusted me to bring their issues forward and their concerns. And then lastly, my last one is I just want to thank staff for the OCP meeting on June the 28th. There was about 66, 70 attendees. It was nice. I knew most of them, so I kept a list. There was 9 past and current council members and 3 developers, so there turned out to be about 55 residents that showed up. So I thought that was good. Thank you.
Councillor Gesselberg.
Yes, I wish to respond. Firstly, I'm not going to apologize to Councillor Hain. The issue of the Ryland property is before staff on an application. No information should have been released prior to staff releasing a PLA on that. It was ill-advised that it was released to the public, and it impairs the process of this community. Secondly, Councillor Gesselbrock has voted consistently to see our wells be rehabilitated, which have now been done. Councillor Gesselbrock, as well as others, it's not all me, has voted consistently to...
Councillor Gesselberg?
I'm responding to Councillor Hain.
At this point, you're technically responding to the individual's letter.
I am responding...
Councillor Hain wasn't making those statements. a resident was.
Councillor Haim read a letter in which she started the preamble was that Councillor Gesselbrock has not done his duty to get water to the community, and that is utterly false.
Councillor Haim, did you state that?
No, I did not.
Yeah, well, the record will show what was stated, and I just want to say that I can't accept any of that.
Councillor Swain.
After all that, there's not much I can add to that.
Just one thing from myself, and this is related to the Historical Society being as part of Costin Hall. It has been an ongoing process, and I'd like to also recognize former Councillor Dempsey, who was a strong advocate for those individuals, or for that organization, to expand their space within the Costin Hall area. So in terms of it, it's something that he advocated for a number of years, so I'd just like to recognize that. Moving on, item 12B, Quarter 2 Capital Project Update for information. Yeah, there's a recommendation that we receive it. I'm not sure we're supposed to do that anymore, but it's okay. Sorry. Okay, any questions with regards to it? Okay. Okay, then moving on. Wellfield Rehabilitation, Water System Connection Standards Report. Councillor Colclough.
And just first, I'd just ask if we could take the three motions separately rather than all together. They're all lumped in one paragraph.
Yeah, it certainly can be done separately. Sure, go
I
ahead.
think just with the third one, we probably have to have some sort of opening to it. Or maybe not.
No.
Okay.
Actually, on the third one, just as a note, if it's already in a bylaw, there'd be no need to reconfirm it technically, but... Okay, Councillor Colclough. Hang on. Mr. Sweet.
Through the chair, I noticed that there's a typo in this, and it basically, it's the second motion to be incorporated to a new water system service bylaw, I should say, not water service system bylaw.
Okay. Councillor Colclough.
I move that $50,000 be included in the 2018 budget for rehabilitation of District of Landsville Zone Number 5.
Seconder for that? Second by Councillor Gesselbrock. Discussion? I guess I just have to kind of confirm, are we referring it to 2018 budget discussions, or are we already making decisions about the 2018 budget? Because my recommendation would be that we refer it to budget discussions, because the budget itself is still going to be voted on as a separate process, and at that time it could be removed.
I would accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, so just as an amendment, 50,000 be included in the 2018 budget discussions?
Yes.
Is the seconder all right with that? Okay. If there's no opposition, a friendly amendment to add the word discussions after the word budget. Any further discussion? Councillor Swain?
Through the chair of staff, just a question about well number 5. I believe on page 53 of the agenda, I guess in the second paragraph under summary, it says there that the number 5 could contribute a significant quantity of water towards overall capacity. How did you actually determine that, just out of curiosity?
Through the chair, while doing the pump test, there was the pumping company actually dropped the pump down into it and physically pumped water out of it while measuring the levels in the rest of the water in the wells.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Councillor Hain?
I don't know if this is the appropriate time or if another motion is, but my understanding We were going to receive a water master plan tonight, which would have helped to clarify some of these motions for me. Can I ask that why we're not receiving that report?
You want to take that? It's on the agenda for the next meeting. Do you want to speak to that?
Sure.
You need to use your microphone. I don't know.
The microphone over here picks me up. The one's over here. So basically, after the public meeting that we had, there wasn't enough time for Lanark to get stuff together as a draft to come forward to council. That's one of the reasons the standards are in this bylaw, is that we can identify what the standards are going to be, so we can put them in the draft water master plan and bring them forward to you on the 24th.
So will that report be going to the OCP committee on Wednesday, like they were promised?
Originally, it comes to council. It's not. Doesn't go to the OCP. It's a council document. There's no committee for the water master plan. It's actually for council.
I won't debate that issue here.
Okay. Further discussion on the 50,000. Okay, hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Councillor Colclough?
Yes, I have a slightly amended motion for this to replace the second one. So I move that the proposed water service standards, Schedule 2, Table 10, attached to the July 10, 2017 staff report, be amended to 2,500 liters per day for all lots 1/3 of an acre or less, 2,550 for half acre to 1 acre, and 2,600 for over 1 acre, to be included in the new water system service bylaw for Service Connections Committee water system, to be presented for council consideration in September 2017.
I'm just comparing it to the numbers that would have been in the previous report. Sorry? Anybody second that? Councilor Geselbrecht? Okay, it's been seconded. For your information, page 78 has the Schedule 2 from Coors that you can compare those numbers to. Councillor Colclough.
Thank you. I'm going to comment on 3 different topics here quickly: well field capacity, water usage, and then the connection standard. And the first 2 basically are for background. But in 2014, we had a physically capable pumping ability of 1,800 cubic meters per day, and that's what we managed on for many, many years. Consultants at the time, however, estimated that the water available could be as high as 2,424 cubic meters per day if wells 4, 9, and 12 were rehabilitated and 6 replaced. Now we're in 2017, the well rehabilitation has been completed, pump test has been done, in which the capacity of the wells was determined to be 3,488 cubic meters per day, which they then apply a 30% safety factor to, which brings it down to the 2,683 noted in the report. Well number 5 has also been tested during that process and came in at 546 cubic meters per day, or after the 30% safety factor, 420. So the total capacity available from all district wells is in excess of 4,000 cubic meters per day prior to the 30% safety factor being applied, or 3,103 afterwards. There will be a comprehensive dry weather pump test done in August, which will confirm those numbers. There's a chance that it will drop slightly due to the lower head in the wells, but that information would be available to us prior to September as well. With respect to consumption, water use, including peak day demand, which everything is dependent on, has been declining for approximately, or at least 10 years. In the last 10 years, peak demand has gone from 1.7 cubic meters per day per household in 1996 to 1.33 in 2016. So as individuals, we're using less and less water as time goes by. 2014, the longest, hottest summer in recent memory, which resulted in a peak day demand of 1.42 cubic meters per day. It's important to note that this rate was only hit on that one day. The average consumption over the week was 1.2. Over the month would have been significantly less. Other jurisdictions have experienced similar decline. The city of Nanaimo, even with significant growth over the last few years, has seen total water consumed decline year over year. Declines in general can be attributed to three things: public education and awareness, particularly around landscape design and outside water usage, changes to the building code that mandate or encourage water conservation, and in some cases, system maintenance and improvements. With respect to the actual standard that we're referring to in this motion, the current water connection standard is 3,400 liters per day. I'm going to keep going in cubic meters per day, so we're using one throughout cubic meters per day. So the standard is 3.4 cubic meters per day per household.
Sorry, how much?
3.4 cubic meters per day, which is 3,400 liters that we're used to hearing. The standard is set by the province in the 60s for properties with individual wells. The Landsville Improvement District adopted this as their standard, which was carried over to the District of Landsville upon incorporation. The province, for the reasons noticed previously, has since reduced its standard to 2.5 cubic meters per day. Due to system shortcomings, Coors previously recommended maintaining a connection standard of 3.4 cubic meters per day until 1. Well rehabilitation was done, 2. Infrastructure was updated to connect it to the new system, and 3. Additional storage for fire protection is added for the upper pressure zone. I want to just note that number 3 can actually be achieved in two ways, and this was mentioned at when Coors did the presentation of the report, in that it could be achieved either through a new reservoir for the upper pressure zone or interconnection of the city and Nanaimo water system, which enables water supply for emergency purposes. So in the report tonight, Coors is recommending that we revise our standard to 2.8 cubic meters per day for quarter-acre lots, 2.85 for third-acre lots, and it continues to go up. Our system currently serves a mix of lots, including many third-acre lots. For example, basically all of Chelsea, the third of an acre or bigger. So I don't really see differentiating below the third of an acre size. Adopting a connection rate of 2.5 cubic meters per day, which I've just made, is 40% higher than the peak day in 2014. It's 50% higher for the peak week that year. So safety factors are great, but we have a 30% safety factor in our well rating, and now we have a 40 to 50%, even with at 2.5, we have a 40 to 50% safety factor in there. The district's also undertaking the current design of a new reservoir that will replace the one that's there now, and we'll be overseeing the construction of it starting later this year. However, in the meantime, with the interconnection in place, the three conditions recommended by Coors have been met regardless. So to summarize, we already have a 30% safety factor in our well ratings, and would have an additional 40 to 50% safety factor if the standard was set at 2.5 per household. The other huge safety factor that we have here is the district, at any time, the Director of Public Works has the ability to impose water restrictions. And in the past, we've had that for a couple of weeks in the summer, even at it's only been a couple of weeks in the last few years with 1,800 cubic meters per day. So if we ever got close, the Director of Public Works has the ability to cancel outside watering, at which point water consumption drops dramatically. So really when it comes down to it, if you look at this from the perspective of those people in Park Crescent or North and South and other areas that don't have water, what we're either saying is we will allow the people on the water system now to sprinkle on peak day, or we'll allow people that don't have any water or have water that is contaminated with boron or arsenic to have a new water connection. And I think that it's reasonable if we ever got down below the 30% factor and the 50% safety factor to say to people, I'm sorry, you can't sprinkle for the next 2 weeks, but in the meantime, allow new connections to people that don't have water or have water that they can't drink.
Further, Councilor Coulson.
So I'm not really prepared to debate this tonight. Typically, we would call this as a late item, but carrying on. So the Coors recommendations, I recall it being more than just 3 that they had before we considered revising the standards. In fact, I think it was a full page of recommendations that they had in their report. So to suggest that there was 3 things and we've now met them, I think it's very premature. The other fun thing with this, I think the Nanaimo standard is 2.8 cubic meters a day. I don't have that in front of me, but I seem to recall that's the Nanaimo standard. So if you look at the language of the water agreement, I don't think they're going to look favorably that we have a lower design standard than them, so we'll be artificially using more water than they would like us to use. The third point is to suggest that water connections to troubled wells, boron, people with boron and stuff would be available simply because we're lowering the design standard. I think that's also misleading. Certainly it would offer up more connections, but if you step back and look at the data in the report here tonight, just based on the incremental capacity available before doing well 5, there's an additional 883 cubic meters a day from the well field. That's the equivalent of 260 homes based on our current water standards. 260. If you reflect on the 1% growth rate that the majority of residents expressed in the first OCP survey, that would give us 17 years of growth, or sorry, water based on the desired growth rate. So there's water available from our current well without actually going into the design standards at this time.
Further discussion? Councillor Hain?
Thank you. So the points raised by Councillor Coulson are very important, because then I question, why are we dropping these standards now? I'm curious as to why this report is on the agenda tonight before we get a water master plan. It makes me wonder what is the rush. Right now it appears to me that most of the advantage of dropping these standards is going to be for the foothills development, because they're the ones that are going to be able to take advantage of the dropped water standards. So to me, I don't understand why we cannot wait till we get the water master plan so we have a complete picture before we start dropping water standards. It makes absolutely no sense why we're rushing this.
Councillor Giselbrecht.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Through to staff, and in particular Director Spears, after hearing what Councillor Colclough has set out in support of his amendment, do you have any technical objection to a 2.5 cubic meter per day standard?
Through the chair, so if I got my math right, we're looking at an additional 300 liters per day drop, which is not even close to the percentages that the safety factor is there. I would be comfortable with that, but my report reflects the recommendations of the engineers.
Councillor Colclough.
I guess first responding to Councillor Coulson's comments, I very clearly remember on more than one occasion that the 3 main factors that Coors presented was supply, backup, and fire flows. There wasn't a whole page. The City of Nanaimo actually is considering reviewing their water standards in light of the drop in usage within the City of Nanaimo, for the second point. The third one is, I understand consultants' recommendations. They're always very conservative. They are looking at the water system, the operation of the water system. I'm also, as a councillor, considering the requests of residents and the plea from residents who either, as I said earlier, don't have water by this point in the summertime, or have water that they can't drink at any point throughout the year. And there is up to, whatever it said, 200 in the north and south area. There's the Clark Crescent area. Actually, Councillor Giselbrecht and I met the residents there in the last week to talk about water and their desire to get community water. So this recommendation at 2.5 cubic meters per day is rational. It's got significant safety factors. It's same as the provincial standard, so I stand by the recommendation for those reasons.
Could I just clarify, you listed the three things, you said supply, backup, and fire flows?
Yeah, sorry, I was going to go back to whatever my comment was.
Because two of them seem to be the same thing.
Yeah, sorry. Well rehabilitation was done on well field capacity determined infrastructure to connect it. So that was the other issue we had at the time, was we didn't have pumps, et cetera, big enough to pump the water. And the third one was the additional storage requirement.
Okay. Okay. Councillor Coulson and Councillor Neary.
The other comment that I'm recalling from staff quite some time ago is regarding Nanaimo water, and it was basically stated, paraphrasing, that we need Nanaimo water before we start taxing our aquifer. So we seem to be playing both sides of the fence. Either we have enough capacity in our aquifer and the water numbers that we're stating are available with a margin of safety, and then we have an equivalent number of homes we can provide water to, or are we now taxing the aquifer simply because we're drawing more out of it, and now we need Nanaimo water because we're drawing more from the well field. And so we need to clarify where we're going with this, and then we can have a discussion on the standard. Thanks.
Councillor Neary.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm wondering whether that was a rhetorical question or a question directed to staff, because I'm interested in the answer to it. But I have my own question.
Which?
Councillor Coulson.
Did you ask a question?
Possibly indirectly. Maybe I will ask a question.
Go ahead.
So, I started with a paraphrased comment from staff. So, are we going to be taxing the aquifer? I'll ask that.
Oh, okay.
Through the chair, basically taxing the aquifer is not going to happen right away. My suggestion would be to have Nanaimo water as a backup. That was kind of what was recommended quite some time ago. So, in a sense, we have the aquifer produces a certain amount of water. We get to that point, it may take years. It may take months. I don't know. That's going to be up to council on growth and all the stuff to do with the OCP and all that stuff. But in a sense, what we were looking at is we have extra capacity in the well field, and until such time that capacity is used, there's no reason to get water from somewhere else. To have it as a backup, yes. If it becomes to a point where we're taxing the aquifer too much, we'll either have to stop handing out services or we'll have to turn the tap on.
How about Councillor Coulson?
Sorry, just a follow-up. So by backup, we mean not actually using it, but it being in standby as in extra water, but not actually actively used?
Through the chair for the time being, yeah, that was the idea of the connection from staff's perspective for a while.
Yep. Councillor Neary.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question to staff. It relates to comments that Councillor Hayne made. Her question was, but I don't know whether it was actually posed to staff, staff didn't respond, is what would be the rationale, regardless of what kind of standard, what that standard looks like, or when council decides it wants to adopt it or not. Could staff please explain the rationale behind bringing forward this recommendation at this time? I noticed too that it's actually the implementation of the recommendation is for it to be integrated into a new bylaw. It's not something that is going to be, in the way I'm reading it, it's not going to be implemented or become standard immediately that's in place. It's just the go-ahead. This is an enabling recommendation so that staff can integrate it into a new bylaw, but I'm wondering why the timing is now.
Okay, through the chair, basically the standards were a part of the Water Master Plan, And the water master plan is going to be presented in draft form, of course, to council on the 24th. So one of the things bringing this forward was the idea of bringing this forward so we could know what those standards are. With the draft master plan, there's a formula between growth and water. So that takes into account certain areas of the district so that we can identify which areas that we can get to. So that's where that's coming from. It was put forward first to try and get an idea on what council would be comfortable with so that we'd have the ability to present it on the 24th. And the other issue is that I'm not here on the 24th. I'm gone away, so it's kind of wanted to bring this forward to council so I can answer questions before I left.
Okay, just to test my understanding then, this is basically a heads up about what to expect is going to come forward within that water master plan. And even in that draft plan, regardless of whichever numbers go in today, they can still be revised down the road.
Oh, of course.
Thank you.
Councillor Swain.
Thank you, through the chair. So a question through to staff. At this point, if we do make more connections available to the people on the community system, who's to benefit at this point? If we open up more connections right now, who's to benefit?
Through the chair, I guess that would be a mix of residents that are near the system that want to connect, and residents, once the water master plan is completed, I suspect we won't be giving out any new connections till that is done. So what we're looking at that time is identifying the areas within the district that need water and how to get the water to them. And so it could be a mix of existing and development.
So, as just a follow-up comment to that, would it be fair to say, unless you have a water main running in front of your property, you will not benefit from this expansion or this lowering of the standard for making connections available? More or less.
That is partially the way to look at it. The other way is that it gives the folks in those areas, we'll use Clark Drive in particular, if they decide that they want water up there, we'll look at a design and give them a cost.
Yeah.
They'll have the option.
I understand that, but it's this is kind of like Avatar and Unobtainium. It's we know that people are not going to be paying for pipes to extend to their neighborhoods because it's just going to be grossly too expensive. So with knowing that we're going to have available connections to people that have a pipe running in front of their house, has there been any consideration given to how these monies are going to be taken from this development, whether it's from existing Lanceville homeowners that want to subdivide their property for their kids or whoever, or even other developers? Has there been consideration given how that money is going to be used in expanding our current system, so the folks out in Clark and Blackjack and the Winds, has any consideration been given to how we're going to take this money in? Because there will be money coming in and actually putting it to the expansion of our system.
Okay, so through the chair. What I think you're asking is how are we going to get money from the developers to benefit the system?
Well, if we're going to have available connections, even on, we'll just use Dickinson for instance, people are going to be paying DCCs and all sorts of, hookup fees and so on. But those monies have consideration being given to how we're going to use that to expand our system. Is there any strategy being put together so we can actually expand our community water system? Because that's what it is, right? It's a community water system.
Well, through the chair, once the water master plan is completed, then we can start looking at the DCC bylaw. And there's projects on that list of the DCC bylaw that we can actually use that funding, that money to provide for those projects. So, and that in the DCC there'll be projects that upgrade piping to get to certain areas of the district. So.
That's just a follow-up comment. I live off of Dickinson, and I've heard, I guess, a well driller truck working away, and for residents that are tired of waiting for connections, and so they're creating their own water source so they can develop their property. They already have the sewer, but they're waiting, and to me, that's like a lost customer on our community's water system. So I'm in support of lowering the standard, because it will make more connections available, more customers, and hopefully more money coming in, so we can expand and to the residents who actually do need the water.
Councillor Colclough, and then I'm going to take a shot at it.
Okay, actually, Director Spears answered the question, but I just want to clarify, we're not lowering the standard, we're adjusting the standard to where it should be, and it's justified under past water consumption.
Wow, you are a politician. Any comment, Mr. Spears? No, leave that one alone. When is the reservoir going to be constructed? And why are we taking it over? Because I heard earlier that we're going to be managing the reservoir project on the foothills.
Yes, through the chair. Basically, we looked at a joint partnership with the foothills in building the reservoir. However, it seemed to be that it wasn't working as a collective. Basically now, so that what we've done is we've taken on design and tendering of that reservoir, because
Okay.
it's more of a
And how long is that process going to take?
the layout and design has begun. We're looking at hopefully having the design completed by October and tendering it shortly thereafter.
So how long is it going to take?
It'll take about. It'll be.
Would it be fair to say a year?
Till the time it's actually turned on.
Okay. So we're making a motion tonight, and we can dress it up all we want. But basically, the way it was represented is that it would incorporate these standards. It was approval of these standards to give guidance to the consultants. For a motion, no, but the reservoir part was taken off the motion on the amended motion. So we're not waiting for a reservoir in that case. A number of times, council members in the past have made quite emphatic statements about following the direction of experts that have been retained. So let me just kind of read some of the things the water experts, Coors, have said. Their 2015 report, monitor, test, and evaluate the effectiveness of well field improvements to confirm that the target safe water yield is being delivered. It doesn't just say test, it's whether or not it's being delivered. Monitor, test, and evaluate the impacts of new well field improvements on the aquifer to determine if aquifer levels are being maintained in a sustainable fashion. Review land use activities within the aquifer recharge zone to mitigate potential impacts, and part of that is taken on a project-by-project basis. Implement well field improvements and storage upgrades and confirm their effectiveness before considering any changes to the current system design standards. If you consider a one pump test over a number of days to be confirmed their effectiveness, it doesn't necessarily indicate sustainability. Servicing new lands from the well field could result in increased water usage by the current users, as the perception of the need for water conservation could decrease. Low in hydrology has estimated the long-term sustainable yield of the aquifer subject to land use changes in the upstream recharge areas of the aquifer. Also, our existing reservoir size is very limited and cannot accommodate a larger diameter tank. I believe that's talking about the Alds Road Reservoir. Coors report in 2016, following the development of secondary water source and an increase in the reservoir storage capacity, the proposed standards for residential development are to be considered for a change. The system improvements to increase storage capacity that have been recommended are necessary before any revision to the design standard is considered. If the design standards are adjusted, then continue monitoring, etc., to assess future changes. Recommendations. continue to implement improvements to the well field and utilize the aquifer as recommended in the July report before undertaking any revisions to the design demand standards. Increase reservoir storage within the district as recommended before undertaking any revisions to the design standards. Proceed with any changes to the design standards on an incremental basis and only after improvements to the storage and supply system are made. Review system performance on a regular basis and be prepared to make adjustments as conditions warrant. There's been some work done with regards to the increase of the capacity of the aquifer, and so the consideration of some additional connections appears to be there based on what the experts have said. When it comes to the aspect of experts and the time that I've been part of the district, and before that the improvement district, we had the people that said we had water, we had the people that said we didn't have water, and the current flavor of the day is that we do have water. However, there are all those warnings within what they say that says proceed very slowly, proceed very carefully with regards to what you do. So the idea of allocating water connections based on the existing standard, that possibility is already there. So why jump to changing the standards? Councillor Hayne questioned who would possibly benefit. Well, Foothills has not turned their well over to the district, but we changed the standards. They only have one well, that would increase their capacity. If the well itself is turned over to the district and then standards are changed, then the Foothills does not benefit with regards to it. And last thing is there's been mention of backup in the papers. There was quite a lot of mention with regards to Nanaimo being a backup. In fact, going back to the previous election, that was touted as a change in heart with regards to a number of people. It's been expressed by people at this table. Certain council members and staff made an issue of whether the Lanceville-Nanaimo agreement refers to upper versus lower Lanceville as opposed to upper versus lower pressure zone. While I disagree with a number of reasons, for a number of reasons, if we assume that it is the upper and lower pressure zone, then what has potentially been sacrificed by this designation? The Lanceville-Nanaimo agreement allows for the connection of the upper zone and the lower zone for emergency purposes only. No mention of a new middle zone as described in the storyboards that we saw last week on or 2 weeks ago on the OCP and the Water Master Plan. No mention with regards to the Foothills zone. The agreement expressly says emergency purposes to lower Lanceville. It does not mention, through the PRV, it does not mention these upper zones. Let me correct that. The middle zone and the Foothills zone. When it comes to the aspect of the flip-flopping back and forth, when it comes to the consideration of the water agreement, I would suggest that the reading of that agreement does not provide for backup for those zones. Yet here we are considering a blanket change, not only what the experts recommend, but going even further than that with regards to the standards themselves. Yet it violates a number of the recommendations and findings within those various Coors reports. I think it's preemptive to do this. I think we should wait to see the Water Master Plan side of things. They can incorporate the suggested, recommended, whatever we want to call it, items out of the Coors report, and we'll see what it looks like. For us to preempt it at this point, with no details effectively of the Water Master Plan, with effectively no backup for the two of the zones with regards to the supply of water, and people would say, well, Foothills is supposed to get their own water. The minute that becomes part of the community system, we are responsible for it. And as I suggest in the agreement itself, there is no backup for those areas. So I recommend a more cautious approach. Like I said, with regards to the idea of beginning to issue connections based on the tests of the wells, I have no issue with regards to that. However, a dropping of the standards and dropping them, and I don't know if anybody had the time to confirm what City of Nanaimo's was in relation to Councillor Colson's question, whether City of Nanaimo's was even higher than ours were. I would suggest that we go in a more step-by-step process, and to drop the standards at this point, to even incorporate into water service system bylaw itself as a council, I think is irresponsible with regards to not only the existing residents, but the potential new residents, and also the City of Nanaimo. Councillor Hain.
So based on that, I won't be supporting this motion. I do not believe in putting our residents at risk, which is what we're doing. If we have an emergency water situation, they will not get water. So I'm not prepared to do that. I appreciate the fact that we'd like people to be able to subdivide their property, but we do it in a timely fashion, like Coors recommended when they stood in front of us here a number of years ago and said, take it step by step.
Councillor Coulson and Councillor Gisbert.
So I'd like to add another point further to the comment about how, depending on when this change happens, the foothills might benefit based on who owns their well at the time. Another interesting point to consider is with bylaw 55.1 now being neutered and ineffective, if there was other developers in behind the scenes that have wells they're trying to incorporate into the water system, then by lowering the standard now, that would effectively give them more units based on the available water they have from whatever well they're trying to bring on board.
Councillor Gisbert.
Yes, thank you. I've listened to and read the mayor's objections and what people have sent me from his social media site. I've heard Councillor Coulson's objections as reported on his social media site for the last 2 years. There was a by-election in this community in August of 2015, and my understanding, I'll say that again, my understanding of why I was elected was to move ahead in this community with both the security of water, redundancy of water, and rational planned development. We've waited too long. 20 years is too long. We don't want stagnation. We want to move ahead. And I'm supporting Councillor Colclough's amendment as a progressive amendment. It will give direction to the people preparing the water master plan. This will come back before council again. But as I'll reiterate, we have waited too long. We want to move ahead.
Councillor Colclough.
Well, I hope I didn't confuse matters here too much with my introduction here. I did talk about well field capacity, water usage, and the connection standard. And I actually did that just to illustrate where and to what extent there are safety factors built into the design and operation of the water system. The standard, what we're talking about, the amount of water per connection, is actually totally removed from well capacity, where the water comes from, or anything else. It's my understanding that it's up to the Director of Public Works to determine what capacity the district's water system has. If the connection is, the standard is 5 cubic meters or 2.5 cubic meters, it's irrelevant. At some point when he's monitoring the system, he will determine what water is available. We don't set the capacity of the well field. This isn't talking about just the standard per connection. And as I said earlier, at 2.5, which is now the provincial standard as well, at 2.5, we have a 40% safety factor in that component alone. So what the number is, whether it's 2.5 or 2.8 or 3.4, it's still up to the Director of Public Works to manage the water supply and to say yes or no to new water connections.
Councillor Coulson.
Sorry, I got to reply to that. That's offering false hope. It really is poor. As the former manager of Public Works or whatever it was at the RDN, when you're doing a design project like this, what's the first thing you do? You go to the design standards. And to suggest that there's someone in behind the wings that can overrule or trump or bring validity to whatever you've designed just because they're there, that's really poor. You look at the standard, and to not get it right, I'm speechless, actually. I really am. I fully agree with lowering the standards. I do. When you look at our actual usage, we have ways to go. but we have to approach it in a very systematic and safe fashion, like the engineers that the mayor went through, their summary of their recommendations has to be done systematically. And the fact that we have this motion here sprung on us, it's very suspect and poor. I'm just going to stop there.
Okay, I just want to clarify, the motion itself, broadly speaking, was not sprung on us. It's a changed motion to some level, but I would suggest it's similar. Councillor Coppola?
Well, thank you for that comment, and I think I've said enough.
Further comment? Councillor Neary?
Thank you, Your Worship. I've given this a lot of thought. I've listened to all of the, I wouldn't call it necessarily debate, but I've listened to all of the discussion that's taken place. At this point, based on information that has been disseminated here tonight, and based on my confidence in staff, I am not going to support this particular motion. However, that doesn't mean that I don't agree with lowering the standard or giving staff the instructions to incorporate that lower standard in forthcoming legislation in keeping with their recommendation. And I'll leave it at that.
Further discussion. I've got a couple of points. First off, Councillor Geselbrecht, we were all elected, not just yourself. So to hold yourself out as the individual that's the guiding light is incorrect. With regards to the safety factor, Coors & Associates, reasonably sized firm, good individuals in that respect. People I respect immensely with regards to how they've looked after the interests of the district over the years. If we're just going to basically take their stuff and toss it aside, I guess we can do that. When it comes to safety factors, they're well aware of safety factors. When it comes to their approach, not only would they have incorporated safety factors, they gave us steps to consider and recommendations to consider in order to protect the residents themselves with regards to the system. With regards to we don't set the capacity of the well field, well actually the capacity of the well field in terms of water is not set even by Mr. Spears. That's kind of, I'm not going to go God because that would be something different. When it comes to the standard itself, we could just turn it over to any director of public works and say, hey, go manage it. Except the problem is that we take responsibility for the outcome. And when it comes to Mr. Spears, I fully respect his abilities. I fully respect the information he's given me over the years. But in this particular case here, our role is to set that standard. Similar to the idea of a zoning bylaw, we could turn it over to a planning individual, and they could plan our community quite well, likely without an OCP or without a zoning bylaw. Yet we have those items in place. We're elected to take responsibility for it. We don't turn it over to other individuals. Needless to say, though, I will not be supporting the motion. Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Coppola?
Just one final point of clarification. This original motion included the water system service bylaw, which will be coming to us at some future date. I suppose the earliest it could have been in September, which is why I had September in the proposed motion. If that was passed in September, there are very few people that could physically connect within the next year. And I don't agree with doing things one step at a time, Sir Adam, if they're not directly linked. If there's something that we can do to move things along, I support that, particularly when it's something as critical to a number of residents in Lanceville that are looking for hope and hoping that there's going to be a solution or potential solution at least. One of the other things that's come up over the last year in questions around the OCP review and the Water Master Plan has been, well, if we don't have any water, what's the use? Well, we have just gone through an exercise with a pump test that has established a number that indicates we have additional supply. So I was just moving the next step forward, this step forward, in conjunction with that by saying, okay, so now let's look at the actual standard. Not how much water, not how many connections, but what's a reasonable standard? And in my opinion, 2.5, 40 to 50% safety factor is reasonable. So that's the reason I proposed it.
My apologies, that did raise some questions. Mr. Spears, based on the information from our hydrogeologists and Coors Engineering on the capacity of the well field and our existing standard of 3.4 cubic meters per day, could we issue new connections right now?
Through the chair, you have 19.7 connections available.
Okay, so if very few individuals could benefit from it, there's 19 connections. Now that's without well 5, correct?
No, that's including all 5.
That's including well 5?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we follow through and do well 5, there's some connections for the very few without touching our standards at all. So from that standpoint there, if there's somebody in close proximity to the system without any direction from council, correct? Our Director of Public Works could issue some connections. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Councillor Hain, Councillor Coulson, Councillor Neary, and Mayor Hain opposed. Motion defeated. 3-4. Councillor Neary.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to move the staff's recommendation number 2, that the proposed water servicing standards schedule to table 10 attached to the July 10th, 2017 staff report be included in the new water system service bylaw for service connections to the community water system once the reservoir is constructed for the upper zone.
Second by Councillor Kovalev. Discussion.
Speaking to it, I think, I've listened to this discussion. I think there's probably merit in the motion that was previously debated here. However, there is obviously a really strong opposition to lowering the standards so low. I have confidence in staff's recommendation. I also have confidence in staff's approach to the timing. They're taking, I think, a systematic approach to the water master plan and how that is going to unfurl down the road. And this is a critical part of that water master plan. In the meantime, between now and whenever this, comes through, if this is passed now, I have lots of time to reconsider my position and, be reassured that I've taken the right decision, or maybe at a later date, the standard could be considered at a lower level. I don't know, but I think this is acceptable where it is now, and I'm quite comfortable with it.
Further discussion. Just clarification, and it does relate to information that was given previously. The 1819 units of water, what?
Connections.
Yeah, sorry, connections.
Basically, it's 3,100 cubic meters divided by 892, which is the amount of connections that we have allocated.
Sorry, what was that number again? 30?
3,100. It was just a quick.
Yep.
Divide by 3.4.
Okay.
That gives you the number of homes.
Gives us the 911. Okay, thank you. Okay, any further discussion on the motion? From my standpoint, my reservations from the previous still apply. When it comes to the standpoint of dropping the standards without doing that incremental approach as recommended by Coors, I believe there's also some concerns raised in loan hydrology with regards to the implementation and that kind of an aspect. And also, even if the motion passes, People have to be very aware that when it comes to the standpoint of water, it's not an instant thing, other than the 19 connections potentially. And then with regards to the standpoint of priority, that's got to be discussed considerably. And I'll leave the backup discussion for another time. Sorry, Councillor Hamm?
Just one question through the staff. So if we approve this motion tonight, do the Foothills get to drop their water standards immediately so they can potentially do more connections?
Sorry, through the chair, I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding. Nothing's going to be changed until the bylaws are put in place. And from what I'm hearing is the bylaw is going to be at 3.4 until the reservoir is built. So we can do the bylaw initially with the 3.4, but then we're going to have to come back for a revision after the fact, unless this motion passes tonight. I think that was kind of what I heard.
Sorry, just to follow up, is this Reservoir 3 or Reservoir 4 now? Because I gather there's going to be 4 reservoirs.
The intermediate reservoir, the one that the district has taken on.
So the 3, not the 4. And when is the 4th being built?
That's up to the developer.
Councillor Sweeney.
Through the chair, to staff. So you said there's 19 available connections as of now, and the process for that, they can just come to you or go through the district and request it, and they get it.
The policy right now is first come, first served,
Okay.
and we've been keeping a list since that policy was brought on.
So I'm assuming tomorrow's online posting in the news bulletin will be some, in effect, Lanceville's handing out connections, right, Nicholas? Yeah.
We'll see.
Counting on it.
Okay, further discussion.
So just as a follow-up, that'll just be to existing residents. So it'll be those subdividing their land, not to people who have water concerns.
There's some within the area that they're not connected to the system, and they have written letters in requesting a service over the years.
So,
And there is some with subdivisions, like one lot subdivision and stuff like that.
so are they on the pipe, the people who aren't serviced right
Yeah.
now?
The pipe runs along the front of the property, yeah.
So if this work had been done with regards to investigation of the well field and that, those 19 connections could have been given out a long time ago?
We just finished work on the well field, but we still haven't done all 5.
No, I understand that, but
Oh,
if that work had been done previously,
Yes.
then it could have been considered earlier.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Sweeney, thank you.
So just to follow up to my previous question and comment, is the district going to be issuing any kind of press release to the residents so there's equal opportunity? And because it's kind of like French immersion school, you always have the tent city popping up in front of the school to get their kids in. It's going to be the same thing with our water, I'd imagine. There's going to be, people wanting it, and there's going to be people that are ticked off that they didn't get that spot in line.
If they're monitoring Twitter and Nanaimo News Bulletin, they might see it. Sorry, Mr. Spears.
Just for clarity, that we won't be issuing any new connections until the water servicing bylaw is in place. We can't charge for water connections until we have that in place. The 19 will be available, but we don't have a bylaw in place to actually charge for the connections. As stated in the report, that bylaw was rescinded years ago.
Okay. Councillor Colson.
So I have 2 questions along that thread. So the property, is it Seafield, the Voss subdivision that went in 9-10 years ago?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming there would have been some payment of funds for the water connections that went to that development. How would that been handled?
I believe they were approved by the old improvement district.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they were pre-district plans.
Okay. Lost my train of thought on the other one. Oh, sorry, the other one, we also have our water connection policy, 3007-3, I think it is, which should be guiding our current handling of water connections if they were available. So that would be another one I think we'd have to review, because I believe as it reads now, it basically states that connections are available on a first-come, first-served basis.
It does. I think we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves here with regards to.
No, it's just more information.
Okay. Councillor Neary, did you have something more? Okay.
No, thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? What are you at, 4-3?
It is.
All those in favor? Opposed? Opposed, Councillor Haim, Councillor Coulson, Mayor Haim, motion carried. Councillor Neary.
Thank you, Your Worship. I further move that the current 3.4 cubic metres per day as identified in bylaw 55.1 continue to be used as a standard for any subdivision that requires a private well when a community water connection is not available.
Second by Councillor Swain. Discussion. Councillor Coulson.
I'd just like to hear the logic of why we'd have a different standard for a well, private well versus our own water system. Through the staff, please.
And through the chair, when talking to the engineers, basically the system that we have large reservoirs and qualified personnel that look after them. When it comes to the management of a well on a private property, a lot of folks tend to put their pumps in and forget about it and turn the taps on. A lot of the time, what happens over the years, they lose a lot of their capacity. So one of the things that the engineers looked at is basically a half gallon a minute is what we're talking about, and we're talking about 3,400 liters per day. So they felt that that was satisfactory and safe.
Any follow-up, Councillor Coulson?
No, it's fine. Thanks.
Okay. I would suspect, although we wouldn't have the information because we don't monitor those wells, that in a lot of areas, some cases, a lot of cases, if you chalk the decrease in usage up to things like low-flow toilets, that the residential individual who's on a well would also be using less than they historically did. Based on the fact that I wouldn't support the amendment to the standards for ourselves, I certainly wouldn't support the amendment to the standards for the individual well user. But, you know, I do find it interesting that when it comes to it, that there's almost a bit of a double standard, although I do recognize what you're saying about reservoirs and that sort of aspect. But, you know, it's something, again, to be considered looking at in the future. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Coulson opposed. Motion carried. Gets us on to new business. 14A, the financial audit services, the important motion of the day. Sorry, Councillor Coulson?
Sorry, before that, I can I ask a follow-up question on one of the items brought up previously?
What item?
Well, it was pertaining to the R3 reservoir that we've taken over. I just wanted to...
How about if no?
Okay.
Does that work for you? Okay, thanks. Financial audit services. There's a motion there recommended from staff with regards to changing our auditors to Grant Thornton LLP for 3 years. There's an option to extend as well. With regards to the cost, it's comparable to our existing cost, approximately. What do we want to do? Move the recommendation by Councillor Kirkpatrick, seconded by Councillor Hain. Discussion. I'll just kind of comment with regards to Grant Thornton LLP, used to be Hayes Stewart Little, reasonably well thought of firm in terms of it. I think they'll be a good choice. They're also located in smaller communities as well, so there's a greater understanding of the goings-on of the small communities. So I totally support the choice. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Grant and aid request. Lanceville Firefighters Association, there's a grant and aid request come forward from the firefighters. There's a staff report related to it. It's a grant and aid request for $4,500 to the Firefighters Association for funding of fireworks.
I move that council approve the request from the Lanceville Firefighters Association for $4,500 funding for fireworks to be funded out of the surplus account.
There's a seconder, seconded by Councillor Coulson. Discussion. Councillor Hain?
Well, to be quite honest, I don't see how we could not support it for two reasons. One is we've already set a precedent by changing our grant aid policy. We've already done that once this year, so to change it again, I don't see as an issue. And two, to be quite honest, the firefighters were hindered from being able to do the fundraising themselves.
Councillor Hain?
Okay. This is a long-standing event that's been held in the community. The community looks forward to it, and I totally support encouraging them to offer that support, that event to the residents.
Councillor Neary?
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, at the risk of being pilloried on the village square, I cannot support the motion that's just been put on the floor. It's motherhood and apple pie. I can't but agree with Councillor Hain that it's very difficult to turn down a request like this. It's a long-standing event in the community. However, and I recognise her point that this council has previously waived the expiry date on the grants and aid. That particular case was looked at on its merits. It was a one-off request. It was for a particular piece of project or equipment, and it came in literally within days of the expiry date. Granted, it still came in after the expiry date. However, in this instance, I think the key here to my objections at this point are that A, this is very late in the day, and B, the fact that this is a very long-standing event in the district. And so I am reluctant to commit $4,500 to funding fireworks this year, particularly if it's going to become an annual event. I think that merits a much bigger discussion. This may be a one-off. It doesn't say that. But at this point, I am very reluctantly going to vote against this particular motion.
Councillor Swain?
Through the chair, I'll keep it short and sweet. It's about one of these per household in Lanceville. So, and because we have no video tonight, it's I'm holding up an extra large cup of Timmy's, and maybe I'll win something. But anyways, it's a small financial contribution from our taxpayers to host such a fantastic event. And it's a family event, and it's I think it's right up there at Minetown Days. It's heavily attended. Can't say enough great things about it. And even then, the firefighters still come out and they volunteer their time to put it on. So you still have the one thing about, okay, we're paying for fireworks. Sure, it's taxpayers' money going up in smoke, but it's a fantastic event. And I thank the firefighters for giving of their time, and also we have to consider a lot of our firefighters now have young families, and their kids play soccer and karate and all sorts of different things, and their time is split between work, their commitment to the fire department, and to their families, and they probably don't have enough time to do it all. But I gladly, out of my household, contribute my $3, to have this great family event. So again, I'm supporting this.
Councillor Colclough?
Also speaking in favor, maybe not quite as enthusiastically as Councillor Swain, but I think this is a very important event in the community, and it is the first time, I believe, that they've requested money. It is outside of the normal provisions of the grants and aid in that it's could potentially be an ongoing expense. It's not a one-time expense. But under the circumstances, I'm going to support it, and I would suggest maybe that staff if it passes or not. Staff meets with the fire department, talks to them about the future, maybe explains the policy, the part that it doesn't conform with, in the hopes that other options might be explored in the future. To me, this is a big community event, and I'm all for building community. And if we possibly expand our Parks and Recreation Commission to Parks, Recreation, and Culture, maybe there's an opportunity to fund it from that.
Councillor Coulson.
Ditto on what everyone said. It's a great event. Love it. Looking forward to the show this year. Just want to clarify, the motion was for out of surplus. So would this actually still be considered a grant and aid, or it's just money that's coming out of surplus? Question through the staff.
Semantics.
The motion indicates, approves the request from Lansdale Firefighters Association for a grant and aid in the amount of $4,500. Funding for fireworks with funding to come from general surplus.
Ms. Beauchamp.
So as far as accounting for it, it would be considered a grant and aid to get charged to that account.
But would we also show a separate revenue coming out of surplus to offset it?
Yes, we would.
Okay. Got that?
Yeah, I'm not going to fight it tonight. Just, it's a bad precedent we're setting here with grants and aid in general, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because it comes out of the same boat. But yeah, looking forward to the show.
That's important. Councillor Swain.
Just through the chair to staff, just point 30. Can you just read back the motion? Because the one that's in our agenda is to, I believe it's to deny it, the request for the grant and aid. And then as option, or alternative
That's not the
one.
motion that was made, but the alternative was not exactly as worded. I hope I've captured what you said, but.
Essentially, it's just a grant. It's not
What
a
we have
grant.
right now is that council approves the request from the Lansdale Firefighters Association for a grant and aid in the amount of $4,500 funding for fireworks, with funding to come from general surplus.
Well, I think it doesn't matter. I'll make an amendment to the motion to remove in aid. Because it's not a grant in aid. It's a simple one-time grant. Sorry. No, she said grant in aid.
No. The wording was grant and aid.
Yes.
So there's been a motion to remove the words in aid. Is there a seconder? Councillor Coulson. Sorry, people. Any
Details,
discussion
you know.
on the motion? I gotta ask, Ms. Beauchamp, which line is that gonna come out of?
We don't have a separate line item for just grants. We would like to still get accounted for under the grant and aid. We could absolutely remove the in aid from the motion.
Fantastic.
Debate a hammer for 10 hours and a fire truck in 2 minutes. Okay, we're on the amendment, I guess. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Councillor Neary opposed on the amendment. Motion carried. Now we're back to the original motion as amended. Any further discussion? I like the fact that the motion itself didn't make any commitment to the budget process directly. There's certainly been some policy and operational changes of the fire department over the last couple of years that have prevented them from doing the fundraising that they previously did. They have supported the community for a number of years doing this. And this is similar also to Minetown Day. Minetown Day was originally done and pushed through by people in the fire department, a lot of their effort, and in some cases it just becomes too much, and I fully respect that. With regards to the grant and aid process, I voted against the previous one because it was outside policy. However, when council votes outside policy, they in essence rewrite the policy. So I'm going to support this because there needs to be consistency when it comes to this sort of an act. So in that respect there, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Neary opposed. Motion carried. Now there was a second part of the original recommendation with regards to increasing the grant and aid budget for 2018 to 2022. I would suggest that there be no direction at this time, but it's certainly something that staff could inquire with the fire department about their plans for the future. And so unless somebody wants to make a motion, we can move on to the next item. Okay, seeing none. Item 14C, Councillor Coulson.
I move the council request staff prepare a report including supporting documents detailing how the upper pressure zone became the targeted location for Nanaimo Water as noted in the June 28, 2017 public information slides, whereas the signed Lanceville-Nanaimo Water Agreement specifically, 1, references Upper Lanceville being the recipient of Nanaimo Water, 2, all district publications to Lanceville residents make reference to Upper Lanceville being the sole recipient of Nanaimo Water at the time of implementation, 3, the district solicitor conflict of interest opinion of 2013 separated the supply of water between upper and lower Lanceville, not upper-lower pressure zone. And 4, the conflict of interest opinion of 2013 stated the mayor and 2 members of council are not in a conflict of interest regarding the Lanceville-Nanaimo Water Agreement because they lived in lower Lanceville, even though these same individuals resided in the upper pressure zone at the time.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Haney. Discussion? Oh, sorry, Councillor Coulson.
So I brought a motion, I don't want to say similar to this one, but there was a motion at the prior meeting regarding the legalities of the targeted location. A day later, I received information from staff in the public information slides clearly showing the intended interpretation of this, and it has Nanaimo Water being used in the upper pressure zone. There's some other operational questions that come out of this, but at this time I left it at this stage, focusing more on the conflict of interest opinions because, in my opinion, it was quite clear what was being regarded at the time. So that's why I brought this motion before us tonight.
Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Haney?
My understanding of this motion is more of an operational issue, right? How is this going to work between upper and the lower pressure zone and the upper and lower areas? Basically now with the map, it's tough to put it all together with the way the Nanaimo Water Agreement reads, how we're going to separate the upper zone and Nanaimo water in the various reservoirs, because now we're going to have reservoirs just for Lanceville water, reservoirs just for Nanaimo water. We're going to have crossing pipes. To me, it's a whole operational issue because the water can't be mingled between the District of Lanceville and the City of Nanaimo. So I personally would like to know how it's going to work. And so I'm supporting the motion because it's just not clear, and it is an operational thing, but I think it is something we should be entitled to know how the plan is going to work.
Further discussion? Councillor Coulson?
Yes, I'd like to add a bit more of the operational components that I've been referring to. So with this plan that was on page 26 of the public information session, we now have a new middle pressure zone that's been established that will be serviced from one of the existing reservoirs. There will be an entirely different zone or water system created with the foothills. So effectively we'll have 4 different reservoirs servicing our water system. That is quite a system given the size of our town. You wouldn't do that normally. Extra cost, you have no scale of economy. R3, this new R3 reservoir we've heard about tonight that we've taken over, I understand now, that is being put in place strictly for Nanaimo water. That's a new cost that we haven't identified. There was money in our capital plan, or sort of financial plan, to either build or repair R2, that's the reservoir on Councillor Coklaw's property. And so this R3 is a brand new expenditure for Lanceville, solely to facilitate Nanaimo water coming to us. So this upper lower Lanceville pressure zone matter it's it's not trivial. You know, the last point I brought in my motion, what we're going to effectively do, if we say it's the upper pressure zone and staff can demonstrate how that decision was made, we're saying that 2 councillors and the mayor of the day were quite likely in a conflict of interest.
Councillor Coulson, you were talking operationally before. Please stick to operational.
Well, it ties into the operational because
No, it doesn't.
of the day, we were basically referring to the geographical designation. We heard earlier tonight concerns raised about the use of Nanaimo water for emergency purposes. With the way this is being presented, the only zone or only water system area that will be able to use Nanaimo water for emergency purposes would be the upper zone, which is the Nanaimo water zone on this plan, and the lower zone. There'll be the middle zone and the foothills, which don't have access to any emergency water. So, yeah, I'll stop there.
Councillor Neary.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question to staff through the chair. These are future potential infrastructure upgrades, I think. I would like that to be confirmed or denied. This has not been established by council or any other body at the moment. These are proposals for the water pressure zones, the middle pressure zone and so on.
Sorry, the middle pressure zone is a concept as of right
Yeah.
now. The reservoir that staff have taken on has to be built in that area, basically in order to pump up to the reservoir that the foothills are putting in at the top of the zone. We have to, they're building a reservoir, initially we're building a 88,000 liter reservoir with a pump house. We need to replace the reservoir that's on Alls Road. So basically, by replacing the reservoir on Alls Road, we put it up into the area where they were building the 88,000 liter reservoir. This was the initial plan sort of back in 2005. We looked at raising the level of that reservoir. The maximum height of that reservoir that we can actually service from our pump house at Ware Road, from our well field, is at that level. So basically what we're doing with the reservoir that we're building up there in the foothills, the mid reservoir, or 2, I believe, I think it was 3? Yeah, 3.
Oh, no, middle one?
Not the one on Alls Road, the
Yeah.
next one up, yeah. The one that we're building there is essentially to supply water to the Chelsea area, and if we expand the water system, it'll supply water out to the Winds area as well. So it takes into account the sizing required for fire flow. We were going to build that reservoir regardless. It was going to be built either on a node up there. We had planned on building it in the foothills from 2005. So that one was going to be there anyway.
Thank you.
Can I clarify something first?
Sure, sure.
You talk kind of like it's theoretical. So in order to service Winchelsea and Winds, you need R3, correct?
Yes.
Okay. In order to service Clark Drive, Blackjack, can you do that out of the Ware Road Reservoir?
We could do that with a continuous pump, but we already have a reservoir that's sitting...
That already exists.
That already exists.
Old, but
Yes,
it exists.
but it
So that's not theoretical.
No.
Foothills, in order to service their stuff, they got to build the one at the top.
Yes.
So that one's not theoretical, and we're not getting rid of the Ware Road one.
No.
So we're going to end up with 4 reservoirs.
Potentially, yeah. That's...
Yeah, Foothills develops and all those sorts of things. Okay. Sorry, Councillor Coulson?
No, that was it. But I wanted to get clarity from staff. We've never planned on having 4 reservoirs, to my knowledge. We had R1 and R2, which would be either rebuilt in its current location or moved. And then there was the Foothills Reservoir. So I believe we've ended up with an additional reservoir. Is that correct?
And through the chair, with the water master plan, it identifies a third zone. Initially, we don't have a reservoir on the Alls Road site. That reservoir was initially to be torn down. The only way to service the third zone from, if we hook into Nanaimo, or if we use our water, and if we go by the letter of the agreement, it's the only option we have for Clark Drive. So it'll be a cost of servicing Clark.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, and I have one more. And I have one more follow-up. Did I hear correctly that R3 was going to be used to pump up to the Foothills Reservoir?
In the case of an emergency, yeah.
In the case of an emergency?
Yeah. Basically, Ware Road will be pumping up to the R4 or R3. Yeah, 3. So that's for now, until if the council decides to tie into Nanaimo, the line will run directly all the way up to R3, and then that will service the Winchelsea and the Winds area.
But operationally, in a normal day, it won't be used to pump up to the Foothills Reservoir?
No, that's correct.
Just in an emergency?
Yeah.
But we're pumping water out of the upper pressure zone into some yet-to-be-named pressure zone, which doesn't say we...
No, it's called upper pressure zone.
Upper.
So, but if you've got a reservoir servicing a water distribution network, if it's not tied into the upper pressure zone, it's a different zone.
The middle zone, I believe.
Okay, now we're getting into what could be in a report. So, Councillor Geselbrecht.
Yes, I'd like to call a question.
I didn't get a chance to speak, so is it all right if after?
Subject to you speaking.
Okay, thank you. The definition of, or the supposed clarification of the agreement into the idea of upper and lower pressure zone is what raises my concern on these sorts of things, because, like I said, the agreement itself, as written, recognizes the upper zone. It does not, and it recognizes the lower pressure zone for emergency purposes only. Now we've created these other zones. When it comes to the idea of this report on operation and how it's truly going to work and how we get backup out of the Nanaimo water system, if it had been defined as upper and lower Lancefill, I get it, because then theoretically you could use it anywhere in upper Lancefill. You could have used it for emergency purposes anywhere in lower Lancefill. Instead, we've delineated a system that creates these weird pockets, creates the need for extra reservoirs, etc. So that's why I will vote for the motion, so that operationally you can understand it. You good now, Councillor Geselbrecht? Can we do it?
Call the question,
Okay,
please.
thank you. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Councillor Swain, Councillor Colclough, Councillor Geselbrecht, and Councillor Neary, motion defeated. Okay, next item, 15, any late items? Okay, hearing none, any notices of motion? Okay, public clarification input period, up to 2 minutes regarding the business discussed by the council at this meeting. Name and address for the record, please.
Microphone.
And microphone.
Brad Blood, 7075 for that road. The 19 connections. The Twitterverse has already got out there. The bulletin's going to hit the streets. You guys need to be on top of this right now. I don't know what's on your in-camera agenda tonight, but maybe you can amend it. There's a number of people that are on current water mains that have applied for water over the years and been denied because there isn't enough. Now we hear there's 19 connections. Some of those people are elderly, maybe they're not on the Twitterverse, maybe they don't read the bulletin, maybe they're on vacation. But if Hilda Higgs is not near the top or on the top of that list, there is no justice in Lancefill.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle. Additional input? Okay, hearing none, could we have a motion to close the meeting, please? Councillor Neary, Councillor Geselbrecht, this is section 91A, C, and I, and 92D of the Community Charter. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.